Hey folks, welcome to another Top 10, and firstly, just to get it out quick, thank you so much for the amount of support you guys have given on the last Top 10 and the last couple of videos I've done since the whole troll incident. Honestly, some of the comments I was reading down that list, you know that feeling you get when you just want to get out of bed in the morning and everything just feels great? Or whatever bad stuff you're thinking about, it instantly just gets flushed away. It's kind of like that sense of high that I was on when I was reading those comments. There was some great stuff being said, some great constructive criticism as well, but even just some really nice supportive comments. And believe me, it was the confidence boost I needed. Thank you so much. You're all amazing. But hopefully this list is going to be a popular one with you guys, even if it might be a little divisive. This is my top 10 games that I think scale well. Now, scaling is a problem with a lot of games. You know, it's all well and good saying, oh, the game carries from 2 to 5 players. That's all well and good, until you realise the game is decent with 3, alright with 4, and then sucks at 2 and 5. Regularly, games do not scale well, and it's actually quite surprising as I made this list how hard it was to actually think of a decent amount of games. Because every time I thought of a game and I think, oh yeah, that's a pretty sweet one. Oh wait, it doesn't work with 2. Oh, that's a good one as well. And oh wait, hang on, it goes, 2 and 3 suck. You got to play it with more. And there's a lot of games that just fail at being good for player counts. And this gets on my go a lot because there are sometimes, I've ragged on before about how expansions add a 5th player to games. Once have I ever seen that be a benefit. Dream Home, yeah. Is that on my shelf? Yep, Dream Home there. That added a 5th and 6th player to the game. That's probably one of the only times I've actually been great that, oh yeah, we get a 5th and 6th player, because that's still quick and it still works. But regularly, it's just like, here's a 5th player. Prepare to be sat here for another hour while you play this game that's no different from the what was the point? So, a lot of games just don't do it. However, I think I've come up with a good list of 10 that I think scale well at all the player counts. This isn't a case of, oh, it's equally great at all the player counts. It's the fact that it plays well at all the player counts. But if even one player count irks me in the wrong way, can't make the list. Spoiler alert, 7 Wonders is not on the list. Granted, I prefer to play it with 3, 4, maximum 5 players. 6 and 7, bit long, and you don't get to see the cards come back round, which is a problem. But does anybody like that 2-player 7 Wonders variant? Bleh. It is horrible. And it's stuff like that. So I've got 10 games I think scale well here, but I reckon that you guys, a bit like my top 10 low complexity, high depth list, I think some of you guys are going to come up with some pretty interesting ideas yourself, and I'd love to hear about them in the comments as always. So without further ado, let's crack on. My number 10 is the game I prefer to Azul. Azul is a decent enough game, but it's like, I'm starting to get a little bit bored with it now, and I didn't like the window version. Reef, on the other hand, is a game that I'm really getting behind. Every time I play this game, I have such a blast with it. Even with just how it looks on the board, where, everything's all that lovely blue and orange, and you've got these chunky pieces, lovely chunky coral pieces, and you just build a nice sculpture in front of you. That's the sort of stuff I like. With Reef, you're basically trying to build a coral reef sculpture, and you're playing cards in order to collect the pieces as well as get points for how you've built your sculpture. And it works at 2, 3 or 4 players equally well. It scales the number of pieces you have in the game for the player count, so that with more players you have more pieces in the various colours, which are an endgame trigger. And some of you might be thinking, well, hang on a minute, what about the cards in the middle? I find when I play this that it really doesn't matter if you've got 2, 3 or 4 players with those cards. You might think, well hang on, there's 4 players, it's going to be pretty chaotic, the cards aren't going to be the same when you come back round. That's not exactly always true, bearing in mind that at some point you're going to have to play cards, which means that you're not drawing from that middle set. There are 3 there, and you always have the top of the deck as an option, so you've got 4 cards available to you. 3 opponents are not going to completely dramatically change that layout. You should be able to get a card that you're after if you just get there quick enough. Failing that, if players start playing their cards face up in order to collect pieces and score points, that middle tableau doesn't change. And with 2 players, I'll admit, 2 players you have a little bit more control over whether that card's going to still be there or not, but maybe a little bit too much control. But 4 works fine as well, and I find the game is perfectly fast no matter how many players I have. It takes usually about 30 minutes, 40 tops, and it just does a good job. Granted, like I say, I can see the counter argument some of you might have with the middle card tableaus, which is why I decided to put this at my number 10. But I still think it scales pretty well. Some of you might be thinking, well, hang on a minute, you just mentioned Azul. What about Azul? Aha, I don't think Azul scales well. When I play it with 2 players, it's great. Like it with 2 players. It's very cutthroat back and forth. You have a lot of control over those pieces. 3, it's a little bit less. 4, you have very little control over what you're doing for 2 other players. You might be able to screw over the person next to you, but you could not care less what the other 2 are doing. And the pieces in the middle are just going to chop and change too much as well with 4 players. And the game has a little bit of extra length as well, because obviously more people taking turns. Azul doesn't scale badly, but in terms of how much control and how cutthroat the game can be with 2 players, I'd much rather play it with 2 than 4 by a long shot. So that's kind of my justification for that one. But Reef, solid. Great game. You know, if you've not tried this, go to your local game cafe and play it. I'm pretty certain any game cafe worth its money is going to have this in their collection because it's basically cheap. It's like 30 minutes play, and the rulebook is like about 2 or 3 pages long. It's so easy to pick up and play this great gateway game. Reef, number 10. Now we're stepping into Eurogame territory, and yeah, you probably wouldn't expect me to like this game, but you would normally expect this one to make a top 10 scaling list, and you'd be right. Keyflower is, unlike any other Eurogame I seem to have played, where I think, I don't normally like auctions, or like the bidding and stuff like that, so why do I gravitate for this one? A lot of it is down to that map you build in front of you. It's like Carcassonne-esque. You build a little map with the expansions. You can have little animals. You put your resources on, cart them around, build up a little village. And I like that aspect. But the bidding works just as fine as well. And with 2, 3, 4, 5, or even 6 players, it does work pretty swell. Granted, with 5 and 6 players, you are going to have a longer game, but the feel of the game and the tightness of that bidding is still there. You know, even with 2 players, because you're only going to have so many tiles, and 2 of you back and forth are going to be fighting over those pieces. 3, 4, 5, and 6 players works in exactly the same way. With Keyflower, it's mainly the bidding side that has the effect with player scaling, though, because the whole building a village is kind of your own thing. Yes, you can use other opponents' stuff, but, you know, whether you've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players, you've always got something to use, but you've also got what is in your map as well. So it's kind of a weird one. Most people, when I talk to them about, oh, which game do you think scales well, this one pops up. In fact, when I asked Patreons about this topic, they actually, a couple of them said Keyflower as a choice, you know. So it was, obviously it was on their minds as well, but can't be a Patreon choice and my choice, so it's got to go on my list for that. So Keyflower, for a Euro game, it's not easy to find a lot of these that scale well. You know, most Euro games will commonly fail at the high player count because they just take too long or they have 0 player interaction. This one has a lot of player interaction and works fine. 2 to 6. I'll play at any of those counts. My number 8 is another Euro game, except this one is a tableau building game with some serious thinking power required. But it's a very tight game, no matter whether you play it with 2, 3, or 4 players, and that's Elysium. Elysium from Space Cowboys is one that I've managed to get to the table a bit more recently, and now I remember why I like it so much. It's just a simple, build a tableau of cards, do combos, and do cool things in order to score points for sets. Okay, sounds simple enough. Except the way you choose the cards. You have these 4 colour pillars, red, yellow, blue, and green, and the card cost is based on what pillars you have left. You have to take a card or a turn marker tile based on what colours you have left, but every time you have to give up a pillar. So your options become limited more and more as you go through each round. And of course, with other players there, it's gonna get pretty tight for those cards. It's a mean game. But with 2, 3, or 4 players, it works just as well. The turns don't take too long as you don't have an analysis paralysis player there. Because at the end of the day, you're going to have to think about what cards you want. You're going to be sitting there, you're going to be engaged, you cannot switch off. If you switch off and, you know, do something else and then come back to it when it's your turn, you're going to hold the game up for people, but then you're also going to lose because you really need to think of a backup plan all the time. With 2, 3, or 4 players, the cards in the middle scale as well, so you have more cards to pick from with 4, you have less cards to pick from with 2, and it works equally well 2, 3 or 4 players, apart from just an increase in game length. But it never goes too long, even with 4 players. You know, you can get this done in about an hour, 75 minutes tops with 4 players, and it's a pretty sweet little Euro game that I feel has kind of disappeared from the limelight at the moment. You know, it's kind of been lost in the ether. I think this one should get more buzz again, or maybe come out with more, maybe an expansion would have been nice actually, to have more of those sets of cards. But it's decent, I like it, 2 to 4 players, works just as well, tight and mean. Number 7 is a game that if I could play it with 5 players, I would. It's not often to find a game that works with 5 players, but Airlines Europe I find works well at 2, 3, 4 or 5. And this is one of those rare occasions where a game says 2-player variant. It's like, oh god no, 2-player variant's going to suck at 2. Not so. The 2-player variant in this is such a minute change. You basically change the scoring slightly and the cards are a discard pile instead of removing the game or something. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Other than that, it plays pretty much the same. You know, you're putting planes on the map, you're building up the value of your companies, the airline companies, you're getting shares, and it's my choice for a share manipulation game. And granted, you know me, stock manipulation is not my thing at all. But with this one, it's light enough, it's easy enough to grasp, it, you know, not gateway level, but, you know, for those who don't want to go to the whole 18xx style of share manipulation, it's alright to basically say, you know what, here's a ticket to ride level style of share manipulation. But 2, 3, 4 or 5 players, it scales pretty well across the range, and it works just as well. You might think that 2 players with this sucks. I personally don't think it does. I played it with 2 players and I had a good time. You have a bit more of the map to explore, so it's not quite as tight there, but that doesn't make the game any less competitive, particularly as you've got to think, well, I'm building up my shares, but then I really need to think about the ones they're doing. We need to kind of cooperate on some shares as long as I can get more of them. There's still plenty to think about. So Airlines Europe, being one of those favourites that works with 5, which, like I say, is a rarity, the fact that it can do 2, 3, 4 or 5 works just beautiful for me. It doesn't get to the table much, I must admit, lately, because share manipulation is not the easiest thing to get people on. But, you know, like I say, if I'm going to like any game with share manipulation, it's pretty much this one and probably Stockpile. I quite like Stockpile, that was alright. Yeah, that was quite good. I'm not going to count the Ticket to Ride share manipulation map in that one because that's kind of just collecting sets of cards. But yeah, Stockpile and Airlines Europe, they're the ones I get behind when it comes to shares. Not my favourite mechanic, but for this game, it works. And it doesn't matter what the player count is, I can shove it in the bag and play it whatever. Number 6 is a drafting game with a bit of area control thrown in, and you probably never expected to see this one on the list, but Bunny Kingdom does work with 2 to 4 players. Now granted, I'm not counting the expansion in this. They're going to release a new expansion to this, something in the sky or something, I can't remember what it is, and it's adding a 5th player. Screw that, don't want it, go away. You know, but like I say, it's 2 to 4 players for the base game, and with that, it scales pretty nicely. Here, you've got little bunnies, which is like, why bunnies? I have no idea. But you're putting these bunnies out on a map in order to control areas and build up giant fiefs, as they call it. I would have preferred a different term. I know it exists, but having to constantly say, how big is your fief, is always a bit weird for me. But you're drafting cards, which, you know, no matter how many players you're playing with, you've got a lot of cards to pick from, so there's always a chance that you're going to see stuff come back round. This is why you don't see things like Sushi Go and 7 Wonders on my list, because I like to see the cards potentially come back round to me. Here, you've got a lot of cards available, so they're going to come back round, or at least some of them are. But with some other games, you find that you're playing with 7 players, you only have 8 cards, and you pretty much have to say, well, I'll take this card and goodbye, never see you again. And I'm not a fan of that when it comes to drafting. Here though, plenty of cards, plenty of options, and 2 to 4 players doesn't extend the time that much. Granted, it lies at about, or get out on the box, 45 minutes. Yeah, right in your bunny kingdom, it's 45 minutes. But it just doesn't take much longer between 2, 3, and 4. You're drafting simultaneously, so that doesn't extend the length of the game. Mainly, the only sort of elongated part of the game is scoring when you actually do the scoring phase, because obviously you have to count up more stuff. But then each player could score up their own if they're competent enough with some mental arithmetic. Really, this could have come with an app or a score pad to score things up. It would have been nice. But, you know, that aside, 2 to 4 players, works great, love it. Great little game. Certainly an unexpected hit with me, I must admit. You know, when I read something called Bunny Kingdom, it's like, what? But, you know, at least these bunnies aren't trying to tear each other apart. Yeah, parents, traumatize your kids for Christmas. So, that's Bunny Kingdom. This one's a bit of a catch-all, you know, you could call it Yellow and Yangtze, or, sorry if I mispronounced that, or Tigris and Euphrates, doesn't matter. They're pretty much identical games, just with a few tweaks in how they operate. But, man, these scale well. 2 to 4 players, it feels like a different game between 2 and 4, but it doesn't make it any less good. With 4 players, you've got more people on the map to contend with and have battles with. But with 2, you've got the ability to build up and up and up, and then eventually go for those big battles with your opponent. And it's no less competitive whether it's 2, 3, or 4. You've still got a decent amount of space on the map. It's up to you. You know, you can't just let someone turtle all day. You've got to get up in their face eventually. And it doesn't matter if it's 2, 3, or 4 players. People are going to get in each other's faces regularly. It's going to happen. The pagodas in this version, or the pyramids in the other one, they basically, or was it temples? I can't remember. But they're always contested. They're always worth going after. And in here, it's done a bit better than Tigris in my opinion, because I like the fact that the colours of the different types of tiles that you put down have got different special rules apiece. Nothing too complicated, but stuff like draw from a different set of cards, you know, destroy another tile, you know, get a bonus for this, and it's really cool to do. It's a solid strategy game. You know, I don't often go for a lot of Knizia stuff, but this one just kind of sang to me. This one and Tigris and Euphrates. I mean, if you're wondering about which one to get, this is my preferred one, but you could get any of them. Either of the two works fine with me. But there's just something about it. Just the strategies involved, the amount of thinking you got to do, and it's not too complex. This isn't like a 3-hour monstrosity or anything. This is about a 90-minute abstract strategy game. Yeah, it's abstract. Come on. Seriously. Theme. Whatever. But, you know, it's a solid game. Definitely works. 2, 3, or 4. Have not got a problem with it at all. It will feel different, but that doesn't mean it won't scale well. If it plays differently at different player counts, then great. You can have a different experience with the game, no matter how often you play it. So that's gotta be a good thing. Yellow and Yangtze. My number 4 really doesn't get enough love. Why are not more people talking about this game? A lot of people like it, but it just seems to kind of come and go. Really? Quadropolis needs more attention. It's a brilliant gateway level city building game. And if you want to add more buzz to it, you just flip it to the expert side, and then you've got some more options there. But 2 to 4 players, perfect. I mean, basically you're taking stuff off a central board in order to put onto your own board. If you have 2 players, you have less tiles there. 3, you add a few more. 4, you add a few more. So whichever player count you play it at, it will always be contested. You'll always be strapped for space. And a lot of the fun is outside of that board. It's building up your own board, which, like I say, 2, 3, or 4 players, you're still going to be building up your board. It's not like your board shrinks or gets larger. So you've always got that fun aspect. But the middle board works perfectly. 4 players, you'll have the entire thing filled up. And you'll still feel like there's not enough room for you to put your architects down, because the opponents will be blocking your area with that rotten little black pawn that you just want to... In fact, come to think of it, he could have almost gone on my top 10 annoying characters list, or maybe been an honourable mention. Yeah, he can get annoying when it's blocking your way. But 2 players, you just have probably, like half the tiles there, and it's just as contested. You know, there is no shortage of, there is no abundance of space, regardless of what player count you do this at. But it's just so simple, it's so colourful, it's well produced. The insert is one of the best inserts I've ever seen, until you get the expansion. But, you came so close and yet so far. But it's a solid city building game that just doesn't get the buzz. More game cafes need this. I don't know whether it's hard to get hold of, is it still in print at the moment? It really needs another reprint. If that's the case, more people should get a hold of this. And I wouldn't say no to an expansion to this. Give me some more tiles to play with, or maybe one extra mechanic to go with it. Maybe a different player board, because you've got the expert and a normal side, well, maybe we could all have different boards, you know, with different shapes and different layouts and stuff. You know, I mean, that'd be cool. You know, just something to bring it back into the public eye. But if you've not tried Quadropolis before, I recommend find someone who's got it and play it with them. And yes, if you live near me, that is an invite to ask me to bring this game to a game night. My number 3 is another gateway game, and I have to admit, when I thought of this list, gateway games just tended to be the ones that scaled the best, which is good. Families are all different shapes and sizes, therefore you want to have games that work well with all of them. And Baron Park, which is trying to escape me as I speak, is a brilliant game in itself, but also works brilliantly 2 to 4 players. With 2 to 4 players, the number of pieces in the board scale between you. So in 4 players, you have all the tiles available, and the bear parks will start at 7 points and go 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and the statues will go 16 down to 2, and you've got everything at your disposal. With 3 players, you remove some of those tiles and some of the park ones, so they're in more limited quantities. But it feels very different when you take those tiles out, because with 3 players, I think you lose the lowest and the highest. So you don't have a 1, you don't have a 7, you have like 6 to 2. And so, you know, you've only got so many tiles there, and there's still 3 of you, so you're still fighting for those pieces. With 2 of you, wow, okay, you've got like a 6, 4, and a 2, I think, for each of the shapes. My God, they run out quick. But it feels different at 2, 3, and 4, but I get a kick out of it regardless. I teach this more with 4 players, but I've played it with 3 fine. I've had some head-to-head combat ones, which work great. It just works. There's nothing really to get in your way. The time length is even correct on this one, unlike a lot of other games. 30 to 45 minutes is pretty accurate no matter how many players you have. It just works so well. You know, not much else to say really. It's a neat polyomino game. You know, you're laying those tiles down and building up your park. You've got to be efficient, fill up your spaces quick, you know, build your park in such a way that you can cover the symbols quickly. And that's always going to be part of the game, regardless of how many players there are. But the choices you have to make in order, like, which symbol do I cover up next? You know, which park piece do I get next? It's going to be more and more heated the less players you have. But that's not to say that with 4 players, you're not going to be strapped for choice at times as well. Works great at 2, 3, or 4. My number 2, and a lot of you probably expect this to be number 1. You know, it could have been a contender, but a more recent game I've been playing, I think, had to take that top spot. But Ethnos, yeah, you can't deny this scales fantastically. 2 to 6 players, and at first I thought, you gotta be kidding. 2 to 6, there is no way this game is gonna work at all of those player counts. Boy, was I proved wrong. 2 to 6 players, doesn't matter how many players you have, you are still gonna be contesting for those spaces. It's just a case of how many pieces you tend to have on each territory. You gotta pick your battles at any count. But the other reason it just seems to work so well, even with a slight variant on the 2-player mode, is just because of how quick the turns are. With 2 players, you barely get time to think. It's already come back round to you. But with 5 or 6 of you, the turns are still pretty fast. You know, playing cards out in front of you in a set, that's easy enough. You know, done, next, done, next. But if you're just drawing a card, it's literally next, 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 next. It's like super fast. You know, with a lot of these games, I feel that 5 and 6 just is an instant byword for long, I'm going to, you know, and just fall asleep. But with this, even with 6, you cannot autopilot elsewhere. You have to be paying attention, because before you know it, you know, you literally might have just tried to call the weight around or something. You know, it's like, you know, wait a minute, where am I playing games? But, you know, it's just super fast, and it's still equally contested on those areas, no matter how many players there are. 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, you're still going to be battling for those spaces, because at its core, it's basically area control and nothing else. Like, not even artwork. I mean, seriously? Yeah. You know, say what you like about this game. I like it, I still have it, but
It does look like she was beaten with an ugly stick.
That aside, still great. 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 scales fantastically well, and I would not be surprised if this was high up as number 1 on other people who wanted to try this list out. It would make perfect sense. However, one game has beaten to it. Okay, guys, hear me out first.
You mother...
Is it safe? Yeah, okay, right. Coming back here. Broom service. I'm not joking here, okay? Some of you are probably thinking, where is Small World? Immediately, where is Small World? We'll get onto that a bit later. But no, broom service I think scales fantastically well. And this is for an Alexander Pfister game, which I normally don't go for, but this one I've been playing a bit recently, after finally managing to get myself a cheap copy of it. And yeah, what's it play? 2 to 5 players? Yeah, 2 to 5 players, and yet every single player count works fine. Granted, it will go a little bit longer with more players, that has to be said, but it never outstays its welcome. The longest I've had this game go is 90 minutes with 5 players. Doesn't outstay its welcome at that, but usually it'll be about 60 to 75 minutes. 75 minutes with 5 players, and with less players, even shorter than that. Why is that though? You know, a lot of it is just because it's the role selection with the cards, and there's only 7 rounds in the game. It doesn't take that long to do 7 rounds. But that's not the main reason I think it scales perfectly well. The variant rule in this, with how it scales, is great. With this, you're selecting from a hand of cards that are your roles. Everybody's got the same amount of roles. You choose 4 on each round, and you're trying to play them as the brave action to let you do more stuff. Otherwise, you're playing it as the cowardly action to do something a little bit lesser. But of course, when the players are also playing these roles, you've got to try and be the one to do brave and not get called out by someone else. This one will have you flipping the table pretty often, as somebody will basically be like, I am the brave weather witch. Good. Good, good. No, and it does generate a lot of moments like that. But with 5 players, you have all the cards. So you've got all the roles to pick from, everything's at your disposal, but you've got 5 of you. Therefore, there's a lot of player contention. There's a lot of tense moments of, has somebody played that card as well? You know, when am I going to get a share of brave and cowardly this round? With 4 players and less, you take out a certain number of roles. 2 with 4, I think 4 with 3, 6 with 2, I can't remember how it scales, but you take out a certain number of cards and you set them aside face up, and they're bewitched. These bewitched cards, basically you can play them, but they deduct 3 victory points from your score. And that's just a really cool variant on the game. You still have plenty of roles to choose from, even with less players, but you're kind of thinking, well, everybody's got access to the Weather Witch, but I could use the Mountain Witch over there. That would get me over to that area. Yes, I'll lose 3 victory points, but it will allow me to get over there and deliver a potion that will make up for the score. And I bet many people won't play it now. So you have that cool contention. Granted, you've got less people to contend with, but there's always that temptation of, is -3 victory points really that bad for a brave action I could do? But will someone also be thinking that? I don't know. But I just think it's a really clever way for this game to scale. I have played it with 2 players, great fun. I typically play this with 3 or 4, therefore you have some bewitched cards. Not too many, but you've still got people to contend with. I've played this with 5 though, and it works perfectly well. You have all the cards, and it is super tense. So yes, the gameplay feels very different between 2 and 5, like fundamentally different. You know, more so than any other game on this list. But each experience feels good. If I want to play it super tense, I play it with 5. If I want to play it semi-tense but with some cool tactical decisions, I play it with 2 or 3. So 2 or 3 for that, 4 or 5 for really tense. And not one of those counts, I think, fails. I think they all work great. I think they all keep the game length to a good set amount of time, you know, even if 5 is going to be a little bit longer. Don't play with any analysis paralysis players, put it that way. It's always 7 rounds, so the time limit's going to be capped to a point anyway. This one's really singing with me lately. I mean, this is top 100 material, this game. I just like its simplicity, but I like how it looks. You know, I mean, I think it's Vincent Dutrait's artwork again. I mean, seriously, I swear this guy is a machine. How on earth does this guy draw so much? Does he do anything else in life, or is he literally just 24/7 like taped to an art canvas where he's just constantly painting all day? I don't know how he does it, but solid game, and I think scales so well and changes the experience so much, but always for good, that it had to make my number 1. So for a few honourable mentions, there's one that's pretty obvious, but we'll get onto that a little bit later. I wanted to mention some other ones though. Scythe. Scythe, I considered it, but I don't think I'd want to play it too much with like just 2 players. I think, you kind of, I think there's a 2-player variant in there. It's not one that I tend to go for. And 6 or 7 is pretty crowded and can take a while unless everyone knows the game, but I do play it at 6 and 7. But personally, I prefer to play Scythe with 3, 4, or 5. So it was a mention, but I didn't think it was going to scale well enough for the list. Architects of West Kingdom, I did heavily consider that one. With Architects, you have 2 to 5. Works fine with 2 to 5, it doesn't take too long. The whole scaling of how many people can you round up with that the town centre action scales with players. So with 2 to 3 you get more spaces, 4 to 5 you don't do as many spaces, but there's more meeples. But, the 2-player works fine in it as well. There's a variant where you can go up against the bot as a 3rd player, and I like playing that variant with 2 players, so I think it works fine at 2, 3, 4 or 5, but yeah, you have to use a weird variant for 2, otherwise it's not particularly good. And 5 can outstay its welcome a little bit with slow players, but all in all, it was an honourable mention. I just didn't think it was going to make the list. What else we got? Mission Red Planet, I thought of, but quickly discounted it because I play Mission Red Planet a lot with 4, 5, or 6. I've never had the intention of playing it with 2, and not often with 3. With 2 players, you've got this weird variant in the game with neutral players, and I'm just not interested in that at all. And 3 players, I just think, yeah, okay, it scales with the rocket ships, but you've got a lot of open space on that planet. You really want to play Mission Red Planet with 4, 5, or 6, ideally, and so it couldn't really make that list. Fields of Isle, well, it technically was only 2 players, and then became 3, so I couldn't really allow that one. And to be fair, I'd rather play it with 3 than 2 now. What else is there? Mysterium. Came so close. So close. You came so close, Mysterium, until I saw you could play it with 2 players. I've played this with 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Works great. How on earth is this meant to work with 2? No way. I mean, half of the great fun of it is the fact that you can talk with each other about what cards you've got, and the ghost can listen in and secretly curse everybody at the table. With 2, you're going to lose that. You're going to lose one of the best things about the game. So, as much as you almost made that list, 2, yeah, I just would not want to play that with 2 players, and that killed it off the list. What else was there? I did consider things like the Sushi Go Party and 7 Wonders and that, because you can get sets of cards with Sushi Go Party that scale well at 2 players, so you can play it with low player counts. But again, when you only have so many cards in your hand, even with the increased number of players, you find that you just aren't going to see a lot of them come back round. Now, in Sushi Go Party, it's better because you do have, more cards, I think. Well, actually, do you have more or less cards? I forget which way round it is. But it scales the number of cards, so it's not too bad with Sushi Go Party. But again, rather play it with less players. And 7 Wonders, you're always going to have 7 cards, or 8 with an expansion. So you play it with 7 players, you pretty much say goodbye to the rest of your hand, you'll never see it again. Don't like that. I always like that bit of tension and it'll come back round. Celestia, yeah, I did heavily consider that one, but I tend to want to play that with 4, 5, and 6 as well. It's kind of like Mission Red Planet. You can play between 2 and 6. I don't really want to play it with 2, and 3 is just doesn't feel like enough players. 4, 5, and 6, you want all the players there. You want everybody to be like, coaxing each other to jump out of the ship, or bluffing, or just ripping into each other. You want that kind of interaction. And I can't think of... Oh yeah, Shadows over Camelot and Viral. Viral does work pretty well with 2 to 5, but it does feel a little bit open-ended with 2. 5 can outstay its welcome a bit. But, generally it does work pretty well at different player counts. And Shadows of a Camelot, again, I don't want to play this with too few players. You want to play this with a big count of players. So a lot of these games that scale really high typically only work at one end of the spectrum. So, yeah, there's a lot of games that I considered, but I just find that a lot of these games do not scale that well. I mean, just look behind me. Pursuit of Happiness. It takes a while with 4 players, it's not much different between 2, 3, and 4, apart from the time length, so I don't feel like it. Dream Home, actually Dream Home could have been a good one. That might have worked. But then I kind of like having extra choice on, no, actually, well, the problem with Dream Home is that whole discard mechanic with 2 and 3 players, it's fine, but you still have a fair bit of open-ended space there. With 4, it's quite tight, and 5 and 6 gets pretty tight with the expansion. But yeah, I suppose Dream Home could have been a good honourable mention. Sheriff of Nottingham? No, you're going to play that with more players. Dice City takes a long time with 4. Automobiles takes a long time with more players. Thunder Alley on the table over there. I played it the other day. Yeah, right. 2 to 7 players. It took long enough with 4. You think I'm ever going to try that with 5, 6, or 7? Viticulture, I like it with 2, 3, or 4, but 5 and 6 just seems to outstay its welcome a bit. Imhotep, again, a bit too mean, I think, with 4, but I mean, that was a contender, I guess. Converter, yeah, right. You think I'm going to play that with more than 5 players? Not a chance. Catan, it's usually who's playing Catan with 2 players? Oh no, you need a variant for that. But Catan maybe 3 and 4, but then there's only 2 player counts on it. You know, it couldn't really make the list to say, oh yeah, this scales well between 3 and 4. No, I needed a range. What to do? Seasons? Nah, I kind of prefer to play Seasons with less players. Nations? No way. Party games do not count. Azul already mentioned. Isle of Skye? No. Isle of Skye, again, it just takes a bit too long with 5. Yes, it's 1 less round, but there's a lot of players to contend with. It just takes a bit too long. Splendor? Yeah, I mean, it doesn't feel much different between 2, 3, and 4. I guess all you're doing is adding time, so I didn't really feel like putting it on. Sentinels in the Multiverse? No. Definitely not, because as much as I love that game, anybody who is a fan of that game knows that it doesn't scale well at all. It works fine at 2 players if you control 2 heroes. Works okay at 3, but you're asking for a bit of a harder match. Works brilliantly at 4, but then 5, it's just a bit of a cakewalk. So yeah, definitely not that one. Energy Empire, no, again, takes a long time with 5. Anachrony, well, it's only 2, 3, and 4. It's probably a bit too open-ended with 2 players, though. It's still great fun, but you want a little bit of tightness, and 3 and 4 player gives that to you a bit more. Downforce? Not really. I like people to have an even number of cards apiece. So typically you're playing with 3 players or 6 players. Maybe 2 player, but I don't often feel like playing it with 2. It's more like you want that group dynamic, because it's not just a case of does the game work with that many players? You're kind of thinking, how fun is the game with those players? Yes, I'm sure Downforce works with 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, but how much more do you enjoy a 6-player game of Downforce with the people shouting at each other and having their own agenda for blocking cars to just 2 of you doing it? That plays a lot into this list. There's definitely going to be some games that you may not agree with on here. There's going to be plenty of games that you think should have been on the list and I didn't think of them or maybe didn't consider them. Therefore, I want to hear your comments on that. But first up, the Patreon choice. And it's, well, yeah, you kind of knew this was coming. It's Small World. Small World, yes, I can see why people think this scales well. But here's my problem with this. I can't remember if the original game goes to 6 players. I don't think it does. I think it's 2 to 5. But, yes, okay, you have a board. And the board changes with player count. So you always have a certain amount of territories. That's all well and good. But the problem with these games where you're fighting against each other is that when you have an odd number of players, you feel that you're getting into a lot of situations where 2 of you could gang up on that one person. Or in a 5-player game, 2 of you might be against each other, 2 of you might be against each other, and then the person by themselves kind of walks away with the game because they're not being touched. It's hard to balance it out with an odd number of players. On top of that, I find that the game just outstays its welcome a bit too much when you go to that length of players because it's a lot of turns you gotta wait for, there's a fair amount of rounds in the game, everybody's choosing what they gotta do, and with 5 players, you know, if your turn is simply to decline, you might have to go, come on, come back round, come back round, come back. Right, decline. Right, come on, come back round, come back round. You know, you could be waiting a while before you take a meaningful turn. So it's not to say that Small World, I think, scales badly, but those little irks I have, mainly the whole 3 and 5 player issue with this, you know, it plays very well at 2 and 4, but with 3 and 5 I'm less keen to play it, and that's why it kind of is an honourable mention for me, but it's certainly not a, it's certainly not a game that I would put on my top 10. There was a lot I considered, but you'd be surprised how many games do not scale well. But I'm sure you guys have got your own list of 10 that doesn't match with mine at all. I want to hear what you have to say. Let everybody know in the comments. I want to see what you guys think. So take care. See you on the next Broken Meeple review. If you like what you see, subscribe to this channel. Find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and Patreon, the usual. So take care, and remember, it's only a game.